Before we begin this podcast, your host, Rob Jollis, needs to confess something. Uh, Jollis was so preoccupied with helping his 91-year-old guest, he forgot about his own audio technique. I wasn't going to lose the magic of the moment, so get ready for some overmodulation and enjoy. We communicate through speech, action, humor, science, religion, the arts, music, medicine, politics, and a lot more. Well, today's guest has been doing this his whole life. Most recently is the host of the TV show Communicating Today. 91 years young, over 30 years of hosting, and over 800 TV shows under his belt. Let's have ourselves a Pocket Sized Pep Talk and meet this man.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, John Monsul, was the host of the long-running show Communicating Today. His show was dedicated to showcasing the many different ways people and organizations have of communicating with one another. And I was on that show. We're thinking about 6 times, but today the tables are turned, and I'm the one interviewing John. Ready for some fun? Welcome to the show, John Monsul.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Rob. My old buddy, and I know, as you said, you were on my show at least 6 or 8 times, I guess. I lost count. Every time you wrote a new book, and you wrote a lot of books, a lot of wonderful books, every time you wrote a new book, you called me on the phone. You were my primary guest, and we did that every time you wrote these wonderful new books. And I was so happy to have you. You were a terrific guest.
Wow. Yeah, listen, I appreciate that, John. But today, that tables are turned. And folks, I have to tell you, one of the most joyful moments for me was being on John Monsul's show, because and I think you're picking it up right now. You're listening to the pro's pro. This guy has seen it, done it, and he can make anybody interesting. So we're not going to have any trouble making him interesting. Let's walk you back a little bit. So just kind of, how did we get here? Tell me where you're from, John, and how you got to the DC area.
Well, it all began about 40 some years ago. I'm originally from Philadelphia, and I wound up in the Washington, D.C. area. And I love Washington. I've been here ever since for the past 40 years. I've been in Washington, D.C. now.
But, John, you retired, and then something happens.
A dear friend of mine, who was a member of the Fairfax County Chamber of Commerce, and we had lunch one day, and he said, John, he says, what do you do for a living? I said, I used to work for Xerox, and now I work for Boeing. And he said, you're in sales? And I said, yeah. He said, have you ever been to a TV studio? Have you ever seen a TV show created? I said, no, I really haven't, Ed. He says, well, how would you like to come to my Channel 10 TV station? He said, I'm the manager. I'm the executive director of Channel 10. And he says, I'd like to take you on a tour of my TV station and show you what a TV station looks like and what it consists of. He said, you want to get together for a cup of coffee and I'll take you over there. I said, okay, that sounds good, Ed. So a couple of weeks later, Ed and I wound up his Channel 10, a new TV station, and he took me on a tour, showed me how TV shows were created, and he showed me the cameras, and he talked about how you produce a TV program. And I was fascinated by that visit to Channel 10. And he said, something, John? I said, what, Ed? He said, you could produce your own TV show, and you could start your own show right here on Channel 10. And I said, well, what do I have to do at this point? You have to come up with an idea. You have to come up with a concept. Right. I told Ed, I said, the communications in the world today are very poor. Right. People don't communicate with each other. husbands don't communicate with wives. Parents don't communicate with children. The Republicans don't communicate with the Democrats. The liberals don't communicate with conservatives. Russia and China don't communicate with the United States. I said there's a lack of communications in the world, and I'm going to start a TV show all about improving communications, and I'm going to give the show a name, and I'm going to call this new show Communicating Today. And it's going to be all about improving world communications. And that's what my idea is. And Ed said, you know something, John, that's a great idea. We don't have any kind of a show that we're doing like that right now. We'd love to have you do a show. We're going to put you in line for the workshop, teach you how to become a TV producer. And lo and behold, Johnny, you're off and running. You're going to be on Channel 10 as a new TV producer. God bless you and good luck. That's how all that started.
Well, you did it. Let me tell you, you did a great job. And I came on. I didn't. If we did it 6-7 times, they weren't the same year. I got to see John Monsul over the years, and I want to tell you, one of the many things that I learned from this man is that you talk, and I think we got this because John and I both come from Xerox. We're process people, and when you were on the John Monsul show, Communicating Today, you followed the process. There was his intro. We would sit before each one. We have a conversation. We get ourselves prepared. And one of the beautiful things that you learn about that is that when you see somebody successful like John Monsul, you realize that it's not an accident. It's not as much luck as you would think. This is a man who studied and was methodical about his preparation. And that's something that I always appreciated about you, sir. So let's keep going. Tell me some. I'm going to hit you with some questions you might not be prepared for. But this man is from Communicating Today. He'll be ready to go. So one of my questions, I was thinking, you've got this long journey that you've had, and we have a bunch of people who are going to be listening and trying to kind of pull some lessons that you've discovered along this journey. Give me 1 or 2 lessons that you've learned somewhere in this journey of yours that had the biggest impact on your career or even your life.
Well, that's a good question, Rob. I appreciate that. As I said before, there's a 50% ratio of divorces between husbands and wives. 50% of the marriages end in divorce or separation because people do not understand each other. Conservatives don't communicate with liberals. So there's a lot of trouble in communicating. So I was just hoping that there was some way that I could, in my own small way, improve communications in the world today that we live in.
Yeah.
And all the organizations that I've had on the program, including you, Rob, and all the organizations I've had, the American Cancer Society, and we've had the American Heart Association, and we've had an organization called Women Against Mothers Against Drunk Driving. A lot of innocent people have been killed with drunk drivers. We had all kinds of wonderful organizations on my show. And it's all about getting these people to communicate more effectively. And that's what my program is all about.
Yeah.
And I thank God I was given the opportunity to do this show for so many years, for 31 years, for over 800 shows. Apply 800 shows times 3 times a week. So I was actually on Channel 10 over 2,000 times, not just 800 times. So
I want to tell you, the one show that I always struggled with was that Sunday afternoon show, because during football season, you and me, we were up against the Washington football team there. So,
right.
But we had our other times, so that's fine. And yeah, it was terrific. So yeah, it wasn't just 800 shows and some change. It's 800 shows times 3.
Times 3.
Yeah.
2,000, over 2,000 shows.
Wow.
So I think I was either the longest running or one of the very, very longest running TV shows on Channel 10. Channel 10 is part of Fairfax Cable TV, which sponsors television productions in Fairfax County. So that's what we're all about.
Yeah.
one of the longest running shows for a long, long time. And he got to the point where I'm 91 years old right now, Rob, believe it or not. And that's my little secret. And I decided that maybe it's about time for me to call it quits and take it easy and turn the show over to somebody else. So that's exactly what I did about 6 months ago. And that was show number 800. That was my last program. And that was done 6 months ago. And I found somebody that was going to be able to take over my show because I didn't want the show to die.
Right.
So I found a new guy. So the show is going to continue on with a slightly new name. And I changed the name from Communicating Today, which is the name I gave it. And we added a couple of words. And now the new show is called Communicating Today with the Arts. Because the guy who's taking over my show is a professional opera singer. And he's already sung in over 800 operas. And he's going to talk about the arts, music and orchestras and instruments and singing and dancing and all kinds of that have to do with the arts. So the new show is going to take my place.
Well, he's going to be great. He's going to be great, but it's not the Communicating Today show that John Monsul had. That's the one I love. And folks, John and I had lunch together about, I don't know, a week or two ago. And I was meeting John at a restaurant, and I said, "Hey, John, you want me to come pick you up?" He said, "Absolutely not." So he drove on over to that restaurant. So this is like I said, this is 91 years young. Who knows? We may very well be talking about the budding career of a podcaster, because I think John Monsul's got some more shows in him. But we'll talk about that another time. Let me ask you this. I think what shapes us, you and me, is not just our successes, it's our failures as well. So I'm curious, and I'm just looking for one. Can you tell me something that you failed at and maybe what you learned from it? I think that would be an interesting angle to hear from you.
Yeah, well, like I said before, I learned a lot more about what people are comprised of, and to be understood and appreciated. It has a lot to do with that magic word of communicating, being able to exchange ideas, to be able to exchange thoughts, and to be creative and have people understand you. And there's all this misunderstanding. Politicians, Democrats don't understand Republicans. Yeah. Independents don't understand conservatives, and on and on and on. So we need to be able to communicate. And I've learned an awful lot about what people need.
Okay, John, I got one last question for you. Okay. Now, I don't know whether you know this or not, but it's one of my pleasures to remind you that you've been an influence to me, and that through your work ethic, through who you are, through the experiences that we share. And I got a note here in my notes that Drexel University, you graduated with Chuck Barris. Is that true?
Yeah. Have you ever heard that name before?
Well, get this, John Monsul. Here's a story you don't know about me. I actually, in the first year of the Gong Show, jumped on a Greyhound bus with a friend of mine. That's right, a bus, 76 hours straight, and took that bus from Silver Spring, Maryland to Los Angeles, California, and tried out for the Gong Show that Chuck Barris was hosting. And that, my friend, is a longer story and another story, but I did get to shake his hand and meet him, and Milton DeLugg and the Man with a Thug. Yeah, I know Chuck from that show. And that for many of you who don't know the Gong Show, it didn't last long, but in its moment, it had a moment in history where it captured the imagination of this country. That Gong Show, for a brief period of time, there was nothing bigger. It was the bigged. Right?
I didn't know that part of the story, but
I was in the green room. We were in the green room. We had been, we'd already been on the stage, had the orchestra, had our music, and we were that show. They filmed all the week's worth of shows in one day, and we were there in case they needed more acts and had gonged too many shows. We were supposed to fly back over the Christmas break, but we we never made it back. We had other fish to fry. John, I am grateful to have had you on the show. Honored to have you on the show. We're going to speed up that internet connection for the next one so we can get you a little bit cleaner. But you are a treasure, and you put on one wonderful show, and you were a terrific guest today. And I thank you for being on the show, John.
I can't thank you enough, Rob. Wonderful. I really appreciate it. I had a wonderful time on my first podcast. Let's do a few more, okay?
You bet. You bet.
God bless.
All right. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.